Hi folks, welcome to another CS0 Intro to Java Programming video. In this video we're going to talk about fonts. How to set the font, how to use fonts. First off, we're doing this class called Font Practice. So as always, we've got our class header, public class, Font Practice, extends JFrame. We've got our main method where we do all the stuff that we always do. If you don't know what that stuff is, go back to previous videos. Now, I want to start by demonstrating what fonts I have installed on my system. You can do this in your programs as well. I'm going to do this with a few lines of code that are going to look very foreign to you, they're going to be new, and I'm not really going to explain them at all. It's these ones from line 13 down to line 18. Right here, I've got a variable of type string, which is an array, and it's called fonts, and this long bit of code here, you might want to pause and then copy this. It's graphics environment dot get local graphics environment, which is a method. It comes from the class graphics environment. Dot, so I'm chaining a method call. I'm calling a method call to a method call. Get available font family names. I'm going to go back so you can see it. Maybe pause it and type this out. String fonts. Get graphics environment. Dot get local graphics environment. Maybe pause it right now and copy it. Get available font family names. So what this line is going to do is it's going to inspect your system, see what fonts you have installed, and store it into an array. These three lines right here are called a linear traversal. A linear traversal means that it's going to inspect every single element in a collection. So I am traversing over my array, I'm retrieving each string that's in this array of font names, and I'm printing them out. So that when I run it, println is going to access the console down here and then print out all of the different font names. Okay? So you can do this on your system and see what fonts you have installed. For example, Arial, Arial Black, Arial Narrow, Baskerville Oldface, Batang, tons of them, Bauhaus 93, Blackadder ITC. So these are all fonts that I can use in my programs. All right. With that done, we now know how to look at what fonts we have available to us, so you can see what fonts you can use in your programs. Just know, though, if you choose some sort of an exotic font that you have installed on your computer, it might not be available on my computer, so it might not work properly. You generally want to pick fonts that are going to be more widely used on more computers. All right, let's talk about creating a font object and then setting the font to the graphics context. So we're done with our main. All we did was we got all the fonts and printed them out. Now we'll go down to paint. Paint is nothing new. We've got public void paint, graphics G. You know, as you've learned from previous videos, that this method is implicitly invoked when you run a JFrame. As soon as the main is done executing, paint executes. It retrieves the graphics context from the JFrame, and we're allowed to then draw things to it. We always call up to this super.paint method so that everything works properly. And here's something new that we haven't seen before in Paint. This right here is called anti-aliasing. I'm going to comment this out. I'm going to show you what it looks like without anti-aliasing. I'm going to get these back to G instead of G2D. Run it. Now, if you take a look closely, you can see the edges of all of my letters are sort of jagged and stepped. Curves don't look so great when you don't anti-alias. Now, I'm going to reset this. I'm going to comment this back. I'm going to uncomment this. Go back here and do 2D, 2D. And I'm going to run it. And we'll compare these two applications. This is, oops, pardon me, this is anti-aliased, this is not anti-aliased. Let's look at these next to each other. Take a look at the E, for example. Every curve is kind of like a stepped pyramid. This is nice and smooth and clean. That's what anti-aliasing does. If you're a video gamer, you've probably heard the term anti-aliasing before. It's how you get those really nice, smooth graphics. Well, from now on, in our graphical applications, we're going to do anti-aliasing. So let's look at the code. Just know that I'm not going to explain this anti-aliasing code in great detail. As far as we are now, it is kind of above our grade. So I'm just going to show you what it looks like and leave the explanations sort of oblique for now. What we're doing here is we're creating a variable of type graphics2D, and we're calling it G2D. We're going to call all of our methods in the paint to G2D from now on, because it's going to be what is our new graphics context. Instead of G, it's going to be in G2D. This right here is called a cast. A cast is when you force a variable or an object or something like that, or some primitive type, up to a different type. So here, I'm casting my my graphics G object up to a graphics 2D object, and I'm storing it in this variable G2D. Okay? So just know that I am no longer working with graphics G, I'm going to be working with G2D, and graphics 2D is a newer class than graphics. It's got a lot more stuff that we can do than graphics. Graphics can't anti-alias, graphics 2D can. All right? So this is called a cast. Next, this is where I'm setting the way that this is going to render to be anti-aliased. So G2D set rendering hint, and then I've got these two constants, static constants from the rendering hints class that I'm applying. First, I'm choosing the key anti-aliasing, and then I'm actually turning that anti-alias on. If you don't understand any of that stuff that I just covered in the last minute or two, don't worry. Just know that these lines right here are necessary. And that this one right here, these two, this is actually one long method call. And you can see that it is a long line. You can break method calls up onto separate lines by, if there's a long parameter list like this, by putting different arguments on different lines. Oftentimes you're going to see me doing that when the parameter arguments get really, really long. So this is just one long method call. Okay? Anti-aliasing. You're going to do it from now on out. Make sure that you know this code and you're able to use it. But if you don't understand what it does, that's okay for now. Just know that it works. All right, that's anti-aliasing. Let's move on to the font class. The font class is a class in Java, and it is meant to store the state of a font. A font is going to be essentially all of the information that tells a computer how to display characters, what style to display them. Are they going to be serif? Are they going to be sans serif? Are they going to be Palatino? Are they going to be Arial? It's going to choose what typeface or what font family to use, what style it's going to be, and how big it's going to be. So let's take a look at it. It's this line right here, which is going to create a new font. Font is a class. F is going to be my variable name. I could name this anything I want. Fudge, Fella, or just F, or F1, or whatever. It's a variable. We can name it whatever we want. You've seen a line like this before. Font F gets new. We've seen this up here with our instantiation. Font practice, frame, gets new font practice. You've also seen it with JButton, button gets new, JButton, press me. What this is, it's the instantiation of an object into a variable. It means that we're actually creating this JButton, or we're creating this font practice thing that is going to be in existence now. So here what I'm doing is I'm creating an object of type font, and it's got 3 arguments in the parameter: the family, the the style, and the size. Now, there's a reason why I printed out all of those fonts that are in my system. They're down in the console here, so I can go down here and look, and then I can copy, for example, stencil. I can highlight it, copy it, and I can paste it in here. These are all my font families. This is my font family argument here in my parameter. I just have to paste the font family that I want to use here. When I run it, you'll see it's no longer going to be sans serif, it's going to be stencil. Okay? So that's how you control what font family is being used. This argument right here is going to control the style. I'm going to delete this and just put the dot here. IntelliJ is kind of nice because when you put a dot after something that has methods available to it, it's going to bring up the list of things that you could do. Italic or bold, center baseline, hanging baseline, all this stuff down here. I'm not too concerned with that. Plain. Okay? The ones we're going to worry about are going to be italic and bold. I'm going to set it to italic and run it, and you're going to see now that the style of my font is going to be different. See? It's italicized. It's leaning slightly to the right. And this is my size. If I set that to 16, it'll be 16 pixels high. If I set it to 36, it'll be 36 pixels high. All right? So that's creating a font. But creating a font like this doesn't actually apply that font to our graphics context. We have to set the font with this line, g2d.setFont, and then we have to pass the font that we created into it. So F is my font that I created, I pass it into that argument. If I don't do this line, the font doesn't actually get applied, and it just uses the default font, see? Which is sans serif, and it's 16 pixels. So in order to set that font, we got to go g2d.setFont, and every drawstring that we do hereafter is going to use this font, okay? So for however many drawstring lines I do after this, they're all going to use that font. See? Pretty neat, huh? We have the ability to continue to change the font, however. Let's say I make another font. I'm just going to copy this line. You may notice that I do a lot of copying and pasting because I'm lazy. You should be too. I'm going to call this F2. I'm going to change the font family here to, let's see, I don't know what Rosewood Standard Regular is. I'm going to try it, copy that, paste it. I'm going to make it 36 pixels, and now I've got a new font called F2. Well, I'm going to apply F2 right down here, above the second drawstring. So G2D dot drawstring, oh, pardon me, not drawstring, dot set font, and apply F2. I'll test font 2 is what I'll draw. I'll run it, and you should see that the second font is different. Whoa, never seen that one before. That's kind of cool. This is my Rosewood one, and you can see that it is now, what did I set it to? 36 pixels high. It's italic, and it's drawn right below. So if you want to keep changing the font, that's how you do it. You create new font variables and you set them. You don't always have to create a new font variable, however. If I wanted to, I could just do this. F gets that one. And if I move this down to here, just assign the new font into that same variable, it also works. But then I can't go back and use stencil again. Okay? Let's look at that. See, it works the same. What happens is I'm creating my font here and I'm setting the font. Then I'm creating a new font here and installing it into that variable, and applying it again. Okay? So I can reuse these fonts over and over and over and over and over again. The problem with this is, if I do it this way, I can't go back and use this font with stencil without recreating a new font into the variable. So if I know I want to go back and use stencil over again and rosewood over again, it's just best to create a new variable like that and store the other font in that variable. So if you know we're going to keep going back and forth between these two, it helps to have them in separate variables. All right, so there is your creation of fonts, setting the fonts and working with fonts, looking at all the fonts on the system, and anti-aliasing. It's a lot of skills in one short video. Thanks for watching.